Just over an hour ago, Nebraska got a commitment from TCU pass rusher, defensive end specifically, Ochaun Mathis. He is a junior out of Manor, Texas, and brings 2 years of eligibility with him to the Huskers. I'm going to read an article about this by Rivals, talk about just overall the significance of this move to Nebraska football, the NIL aspect of it, the defensive aspect of it. I'll get into why I think Mathis and Nelson are going to be a dangerous pass rush duo in 2022 much later in this video as well. And before that, also talk about Nebraska's overall transfer portal class. So today it's going to be about Nebraska football, specifically pertaining to the transfer portal and the defense, as Ochaun Mathis perfectly fits in both categories. If you are new to this channel and have not subscribed yet, I encourage you to do so by hitting that big red subscribe button. I also encourage you to like this video, comment your thoughts down below, and most importantly, hit that notification bell. Let's get right into it now. So Mathis committed to Nebraska over Texas. That was the one other school that came down to the final two. It was Nebraska and Texas. I'm now going to read this article by Rivals, and then we'll get into some of my thoughts. Nebraska lands major portal addition in Texas Christian pass rusher Ochaun Mathis. I will link this article down below. It's by Sean Callahan, Huskers online publisher. Link it down below, and I encourage you to read it. Nebraska has targeted TCU's Ochaun Mathis as long as any player in the transfer portal this offseason. This weekend, the Big Red closed the deal. Mathis announced on Saturday he will play for the Huskers in 2022, picking NU over Texas. I think there are two main reasons, maybe you could put three, as to why he transferred to Nebraska instead of Texas. I would say number one would be NIL, because I think the playing time one, which would be second, is pretty similar for both programs. I think that NIL was one. I think that playing time was two, though that was also a good reason to go to Texas's because of the state of their defensive line and defense. And speaking of that, I think third might be more proven and superior defensive coaching. JoJo Domann just got drafted in the NFL along with a couple other Nebraska players. Nebraska's still producing some NFL prospects despite a lot of their failures over the Scott Frost era. Cam Jurgens, who played on a atrocious offensive line, got picked in the second round, and he has a lot of talent and a lot of potential. So Nebraska everywhere is still producing good prospects, and their defensive coaching staff has proven. Erik, Chinander, and that staff are going to be entering their fifth season with a lot of coaching stability. Their defensive line play is overall solid. It can be improved, which is why I think Mathis coming here is huge. Linebacker play has been, I'd say, great to exemplary. Also coming to Nebraska and having Garrett Nelson help you out in the pass rush situation, which involves both playing time and coaching. In a certain sense, I would say playing time to be able to play with Nelson and fill a hole, but the superior coaching too that developed Nelson and will scheme both Mathis and Nelson together. That's going to be a terrifying pass rush duo. Probably the best pass rush duo in the Big Ten West, or close to it. Though that does not address the interior of the defensive line right now. I would say the interior of the defensive line, it needs a transfer, if not two. I think that'll be Nebraska's biggest defensive weakness will be that interior D line. Now, I'm not saying this pass rush duo is going to be anything amazing. We'll get into that later, but it's going to be good. Nebraska did struggle at getting to the quarterback last season. Again, we'll get into that a little later. So those are, I think, the three main reasons, especially number one, and I would say number three, because playing time was a factor for both schools, obviously, with Texas's poor D-line play. But picking Nebraska over Texas is also just huge in general because of the momentum that Texas possesses, both in recruiting, national hype, and attention. It really shows that this guy in Mathis, there were plenty of other factors outside of what most people would see that were definitely at play, like NIL, like probably, honestly, better defensive coaching. I truly believe that Nebraska's defensive staff is better than Texas's. And if you just look at a 1-year time period, as Texas's staff is that new, there's not a whole lot of proof there because it's 1 year, especially when you're in a rebuild like Texas, it can be hard. But Texas has so many questions on defense. Nebraska, there are starters who they return in Ty Robinson, Caleb Tanner. You also have, obviously Garrett Nelson. You have Quentin Newsome, Nick Henrich, Luke Reimer. All those starters are good. They're at minimum serviceable. Nebraska's defense under Erik Chinander has been improving baby step by baby step. It's not this drastic improvement that maybe most Nebraska fans would want, as it's a blue blood program. You have some resources, but these baby steps are starting to compound. And Nebraska landing Mathis over a momentum-driven program, because Texas does have a lot of momentum and hype behind it. Sark and his staff are recruiting their butts off too. They're really good recruiters. Props to them. They've recruited possibly, I would say, the second best, or at least a top 5 wide receiver core. They're recruiting their butts off. They got Quinn Ewers to come back to Texas, where he was originally committed from Ohio State. So it's phenomenal. This is a big win. It's probably going to be bigger than a lot of people would think. This is the biggest position of need, too, for Nebraska. I'm going back to the article, finally, after a few minutes there. It's the biggest position of need for Nebraska heading into the 2022 season, and Mathis was regarded as the most proven pass rusher formerly in the transfer portal. Now that he's out, there's someone else, obviously. The Athletic ranked him, too, on April 27th as the number 1 overall player in the portal. It's a major victory again for Scott Frost and his program. It gives the Huskers a proven third down pass rusher off the edge. The defensive line is without a doubt a biggest hole on NU's roster, and I would say it's going to be overall probably the biggest weakness. I did just say that pass rush duo would probably be the best duo in the West, or at least it will be one of the best, but that doesn't fix the issue that Iowa, Wisconsin, and heck, I would even say Purdue, because I think they returned both their starting D tackles, have better D tackle depth and play, and likely will. And D tackle is so important. Like, when you think of defensive line, you think of the Bosas, Chase Young, Aiden Hutchinson, because sacks and tackles are a stat that are going to be more commonly found in defensive ends than defensive tackles, unless you're Sue, who was from Nebraska, 2nd overall pick, and was just a monster. But defensive tackle's important. Helps you stop interior runs, and they can help in the pass rush department too. So because of that, I would decline to say that Nebraska's D-line is going to be one of the best in the Big Ten or a top 2 D-line in the West. Because of that, those questions at D-tackle, which will affect the pass rush, but most importantly, the rush defense, there's just some question marks there. There's a Texas Tech transfer, I might have already mentioned that, who looks to be coming to Nebraska. He was also a Power 5 starter from the Big 12. Obviously from the Big 12, as Texas Tech is in there, so that can help add to some depth. In 2021, Mathis had 4 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. He's played in 38 total games for the Horned Frogs and has a total of 15.5 sacks and 30.5 tackles for loss to go along with 135 total tackles. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining. He's 6'5", 260 pounds, and was an all Big 12 selection in both 2020 and 2021. So those were my thoughts blended in with the article. I'm now going to talk about Nebraska's, really just their transfer portal class overall briefly, and then we'll get to the pass rush section and how I think Garrett Nelson and Mathis, they're going to be dangerous, and they're going to help a defense that this past season did struggle to get to the quarterback. But Nebraska's transfer portal class, they are 12th in the nation. They climbed from 16, which is where they were this morning. They jumped Michigan State, who is now second in the Big Ten transfer portal rankings. And it may not, to a very casual fan, seem like a lot, but Mel Tucker is possibly is the sole king of the transfer portal. Just seeing what he did last year with Kenneth Walker. I think he also brought in Jaden Reed from the portal too, because he played at Western Michigan before coming to Michigan State. And look how he turned out. And he's probably going to be in the top 2 or 3 rounds in the NFL draft this upcoming draft, the 2023 draft. So what Mel Tucker is doing in the portal is fascinating, and to see Scott Frost and company, if you're a Nebraska fan, one spot ahead of Michigan State. Granted, Michigan State on average has the better players, though Mathis, if you were to combine both classes, is the highest ranked prospect. It's encouraging. You should be encouraged. This staff for Nebraska, they may not have assembled the greatest high school recruiting class, far from it, but a lot of that was to blame on the previous staff. Mark Whipple, Mickey Joseph, they've done all they can. Same with the rest of the offensive staff and the defensive staff, like Travis Fisher, Erik Chinander. They've done all they can from a recruiting aspect, both in high school, to help bring the class back from, I think, bottom 50, if you were to take all the 100 classes, now into barely cracking the top 45. High school recruiting period ended. But overall, this team is 33rd in the country if you include both high school and transfer. The transfer portal being 12th in the nation, you're going to get a lot of impact starters there. Casey Thompson's likely going to be the starting QB, and he transferred in from Texas. I think Kevin Williams, an offensive guard, will start, and he's from northern Colorado. And in the secondary, Tommy Hill looks likely to start. He's a transfer from Arizona State. And Anthony Grant, who transferred in from a JUCO, a junior college, is likely going to be the starter at running back. And now you have Mathis, who's going to be another transfer starter on the edge. Now, this does bring an issue of team chemistry, as you have a lot of different players who are going to start, who came from different colleges, different team cultures, etc. So there's a risk there. And like I said earlier, when coaches they're on their last bit of thread, they have to get it done this year or they're out. They either rise to the occasion or they implode. So it's very similar when you're using the portal this heavily. But what I will say is Nebraska has struggled in the Scott Frost era for having, I would say, mental toughness, for having a winning mindset and culture. And these incoming transfers are coming from places that have seen winninger days, if that's even a proper term in grammar, but they've seen better days than Nebraska has in recent memory. And I think that there is a very likely possibility they bring that winning culture that Nebraska needs with them from their previous school through the portal to Nebraska. That's assuming chemistry works out. Chemistry is a must with the amount of transfers on this roster. Nebraska's overall transfer portal ranking being 12th in the nation, they're the best in the Big Ten. It's impressive. They brought in really every kind of guy to fill their weakness, specifically targeting the offensive line, targeting special teams, bringing in a kicker and a punter, bringing in a quality quarterback to replace Martinez, and bringing in Mathis, too, to fill a much-needed position on the defensive line and get some extra pressure on opposing quarterbacks that Nebraska will face in 2022. They're going to be playing Oklahoma, who will have Dylan Gabriel, who's a solid QB. They're going to be playing Michigan, who has, at minimum, a solid QB in Cade McNamara, possibly a much better QB in J.J. McCarthy, depending if he lives up to his ceiling or which one of them start. And you also face Aiden O'Connell at Purdue, who out of all those guys is probably the most proven and most improved from the beginning of his career at the Power 5 level. And assuming Nebraska follows through on my prediction of winning the West, guess who you face in Indy? You're probably facing Ohio State or a team with, at minimum, a serviceable to above average QB, with a talented offensive line as most Big Ten East teams who can win their division have, which means, once again, you have to have a better pass rush than you did in 2021. And Mathis will certainly bring that. Mathis, again, had 4 sacks in 2021, along with 45 total tackles, also had 3 passes defended. In comparison, Nebraska only had 20 sacks. Only 20 sacks total in 2021, and a fourth of those came from Garrett Nelson, who luckily for Nebraska returns. Nelson had 57 total tackles, 5 sacks, 2 passes defended, and a forced fumble. And he has a big heart. He has a lot of passion. He's a great kid. He's talented, but he needs help. He needs a lot of help because after him, second in total sacks was tied by 4 guys. JoJo Domann, a linebacker who's off to the NFL. Caleb Tanner, another linebacker who has returned. Same with Ty Robinson, a defensive lineman who is returning, and Phildarius Payne, who transferred to Virginia Tech. So that right there is 2 guys who each had 2 sacks who are gone. Domann, despite all of his injuries, amazing player. He also had 3 passes defended, 2 picks, and 2 forced fumbles. Phildarius Payne had 2 sacks and 19 total tackles. Domann had 71, and I think was only behind Luke Reimer in the total tackle department. So Nebraska lost a lot on front 7 production with Phildarius Payne, JoJo Domann, and others, and it helps so much to have Mathis come in and fill a departing edge position. It helps so much because now you have 2 proven guys who can get to the quarterback, wreak havoc, and do what you did against, say, CJ Stroud this past season. That Ohio State game was one of the few games, along with Michigan and Oregon and possibly Penn State, that you actually made CJ Stroud uncomfortable. And what he did was he threw 2 picks, which I think was the only game of the year that he had 2 picks thrown. It was phenomenal. That game was impressive. That game showed that Nebraska has the potential to get to the quarterback, that they have a good defense, they have pieces that have been developed, recruited to be weapons on defense, and it showed that Erik Chinander is a good defensive coordinator and that Nebraska has a good defensive staff. Once again, they were not clutch in every situation, but with how inconsistent the offense was, you couldn't always blame them for some of the collapses. But it certainly helps to have Mathis come in. Secondary holes have already been filled via the portal. Linebacker is pretty safe with Nick Henrich and Luke Reimer returning, and the linebacker room is still pretty deep. You also have Caleb Tanner returning as well. Nelson is either classified as a defensive end or an outside linebacker. He's a hybrid edge from my understanding. Mathis seems to be the same, though Mathis here is listed as a defensive end on ESPN. Garrett Nelson is listed as a linebacker. So I'm assuming those are the positions where these 2 guys are favored toward. But Nebraska will certainly have a better pass rush in 2022. I think that this will be one of the best, if not the best, duo in the West. That doesn't equate to the defense as a whole having the best pass rush in general or having the most sacks. And I'm not making this comparison because I think they're going to be this good. I don't. But Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo, Michigan had a great pass rush, and they had a pass rush duo that was generational. Their team was behind Michigan State and Ohio State in total sacks. And depending on the day, their pass rush went from being great to being somewhat ineffective. Their pass rush overall, in part because of some weaknesses at defensive tackle and just some schematic things, like Michigan didn't always blitz a whole lot, for example. But this is what I think Nebraska, in a certain sense, has. And I don't know if that's exactly making sense. I'm not saying they're going to be that good. Do not take it that way. but I'm saying having a duo like that allows you to do so much. Maybe Nebraska maybe they don't, like they had to do against Ohio State to force that second pick. Maybe they don't have to constantly dial up pressure and just charge a bunch of guys forward. Maybe their defense, now with a proven duo, can do more to, sit back in coverage. They can close up some holes and be more consistent all around the field. But the defensive line still has depth issues, especially at defensive tackle. I'd say now at the edge position and the end and edge position, they're filled. This is huge again. Cannot mention this enough at this point. I'm somewhat rambling on about this, but at a certain point it's worth it because it's huge for the program. This doesn't raise my expectations for the Nebraska team. It rather just solidifies them. This portal edition solidifies my opinion that Nebraska is going to win the Big Ten West because now they have a proven pass rush. They have a proven linebacker core. Travis Fisher's secondaries are always serviceable. They're scrappy, reliable. Nebraska's filled some holes at the offensive line, and I think he'll improve there. They look to have a better running game, at least according to the spring game and what Anthony Grant can do. And Casey Thompson, while not as much of an overall athlete as Martinez, Thompson is certainly a better passer. So I think that all these things taken into consideration, my confidence, in part because of Mathis committing to the Huskers, which again was big for the program, just increases my confidence in my 10-2 prediction. So if you're a Husker fan, you should celebrate. You're going to have a better pass rush. Your defense, likely, it becomes more unlikely by the day that this unit will take a step back, despite a lot of losing production, especially on the front seven, again with JoJo Doman, Phildarius Payne, and others, and even at the secondary with Cam Taylor-Britt departing. It looks less and less, even with those departures, that Nebraska's defense is just going to take a step back. You have a solid DC in Erik Chinander, who has recruited Mathis here. Scott Frost is, he's recruiting his butt off in the transfer portal. And I think only time will tell, along with results in games, who and what Nebraska is. But Nebraska, to me, looks more and more like they're trending in the right direction, the direction that I have predicted they are trending in since day one of the 2022 preseason. If you like this video, make sure to like it, hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.